Okay. I think it's being recorded. Did you hear that it was?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so today is June 7th, 2013, and we are going to talk to Dr. Jean Hofve about cat food allergies. Dr. Jean, thank you very much for doing another interview with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, can you talk in general about what allergies are caused by?
Well, yeah, allergies in people, in dogs and cats, in, I suppose, in turtles and fish maybe, are caused by protein. And it's for some reason your body reacts badly to a protein. Now, allergies are a big deal. They involve the entire immune system. They involve making antibodies to a particular protein. In cats and dogs, allergies tend to be formed to things that they're chronically exposed to. So whereas people can be allergic to a bee sting the first time they get stung, that's very uncommon in animals. And that kind of anaphylactic reaction is fairly uncommon. But what we do see is we see allergies to things like pollen and dust mites, and to food, sometimes to bedding, sometimes to things in the environment, carpet. But it's inhalant allergies are by far the most common.
Okay.
But food allergies do occur.
Okay. So you had mentioned when we were emailing about this that many cats have food intolerances but not really food allergies. So is there a way to distinguish from the symptoms what it is?
Not well.
Okay.
If the food allergy, what you see, if you have a cat that's reacting and you think it's to the food, there are two possibilities. One is that it's just reacting to the things, something or one or more things in the food, like the colorings or the flavorings or the preservatives or some component of the food, rather than an allergy. It's much more common to have it be an intolerance than an allergy. But both can cause skin signs and GI signs like diarrhea or vomiting. But food allergies are much more apt to result in skin symptoms. In cats, in dogs, inhalant allergies usually cause skin symptoms. And in cats, to some extent, and people get a little confused on the point about inhalant allergies, and we would call it, in people, hay fever, but in dogs and cats, they don't get hay fever symptoms. If they're allergic to pollen or dust or whatever, they generally break out in skin symptoms, a rash or little, dermatitis somewhere, or they'll get an area where it's itchy, so they start licking and they create a hot spot by just going after it too much. So,
okay.
But gastrointestinal signs are more likely to be a food intolerance, but it could be an allergy. And the way to tell is to switch foods. But if it's an allergy, just switching foods may not be enough, and you are going to want to do a diet trial. Now, before you start trial treating, basically, there's not really a way to tell them apart because they're so similar. But you can bet that in the case of diarrhea in particular, that it's more likely to be a food intolerance than an allergy. And in both cases, you'll see a response with a different food, but a food allergy, you have to change the food completely. Like if it's chicken-based food, you would go to something like rabbit. You have to switch proteins.
Okay.
Well, we can talk a little bit more in detail about, what a diet trial involves. Because it's a fairly intense process.
Yeah. Being one that switched my cats from dry food to wet food, any diet change is not so fun. But the benefits.
No, and I had a cat, my own cat. I've known client cats to take 2 years to switch from dry to wet food.
Oh my gosh.
And my own cat he ate the wet food okay, but when I started feeding raw food, the one cat would eat it. She would eat anything. She would eat an elephant if I tethered it to the ground. But, she was fine with it. But the other cat, Spirit, for whom Spirit Essence are named, she had that raw food sitting next to the wet food for 3 years before I saw her take a bite.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't actively trying to convert her, but she watched Chinook for 3 years eat that food, and she was a stubborn girl. But eventually she got over it, and she loved the raw food after a while, but boy, she was a tough cookie.
Yeah. Oh. I would really like to get Charlie and Trig on raw food, but I'm dreading the process. Yeah. Mine eat the raw food. They like the Rad Cat, and they like even better if I make the food. So there you are. Yes.
They prefer Mom's cooking. I wish they didn't.
Right, of course they do.
Yes. Well, because you're putting that little extra flavoring in it called love, and they definitely know when that's there. So one thing I would like to point out about dry versus wet food is that dry food is much more commonly associated with food allergies. And part of the reason for that is that dry foods are heat processed twice. They get cooked at 250 to 260 degrees or more at the rendering plant. Those, the meat meals and the protein meals, they're rendered first, and then they're put through extrusion, which is a high heat, high pressure process. So heat denatures proteins, which means proteins are very interesting molecules, and they're all folded up into a very particular configuration, and the GI tract knows what to expect, and it's ready to handle certain configurations. But when the proteins get denatured, they get distorted. The folding goes wrong, and they get all gnarly. And the immune system is much more likely to react to that. And there was actually a case study published of a cat that was food allergic, and it did not respond to the dry form of the allergy diet. But when they put it on the canned food of the same diet, everything cleared up immediately. So canned food is heated once to about 160, 165 degrees, and usually in the can, and that's it. So that's still high enough to kill bacteria, and it's high enough to denature proteins, but it seems not to have as much damaging effects as the dry food processing.
Interesting. That may, when I was in Denver last, we were driving by that Purina plant. I don't know what highway you're on, but the smell, I-70. And that makes sense because of all the heat.
Yeah. And, the ingredients that are going into Purina dry food, we don't have to go into that, but
right.
Let's just say it's not your steak and potatoes. Really?
Yeah, maybe that's also why I thought it smelled especially bad. Okay, so I know that you touched on some of the symptoms, but just to kind of line them out in bullet points, if you will, of what symptoms do cats display when they're allergic to something in food?
If it's skin symptoms, they usually develop what's called miliary dermatitis as opposed to military dermatitis, which is, if you're allergic to joining the Navy or something. But Miliary means like lots of little spots. So it's basically a rash, and you tend to see it especially on the face, around the eyes, and in that patch of where the hair is thin between the eyes and the ears.
Yes. Okay, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll get itchy feet, but it's usually around the head. I have seen it on the back of the shoulders, and they can do a tremendous amount of damage there because they can get to that to lick. The face, right. They go after it with their back feet because it's itchy as heck. Sometimes you see it on the tummy. But these symptoms can be inhalant allergies. They can be any kind of allergies. They can be, a lot of things. So it's important to work with your vet to tease apart what are the things, let's try this, then that, and make sure you get a biopsy is usually not rewarding because it'll just say it's inflammation, and it doesn't tell you anything about the cause. So, okay. Now, even if the cat is developing these symptoms in response to an inhalant allergy, like, pollen or dust mites or, whatever there, is floating around in the air, they develop the same symptoms. But a hypoallergenic diet trial will often help clear those up also because, my theory is, and it has no basis in science, but it's, based on 20 years of looking at it, when you simplify the diet and you change the diet so those common allergens aren't there, I think just simplifying the diet or going to a canned or raw or homemade, there's fewer allergens presented to the immune system. There's just less crap going in that the immune system has to sort out. And I think just simplifying things gives the immune system a little bit of a break. So sometimes it's hard to tell, even when they do respond to a diet trial, it may not have been a food allergy. So it's very tricky to tease it apart. So the other major symptom is diarrhea and vomiting. And sometimes vomiting is the only sign, even though the inflammation is usually lower down in the tract. It's very hard to diagnose without a biopsy what's going on, but inflammatory bowel disease, which is like turbo allergies, that will have the same signs. Intestinal lymphoma cancer can have the same signs, and there is some thought that a food allergy that's not addressed can progress inflammatory bowel disease, which can progress to cancer. So, if you've got, the thing is if it's just vomiting, in 20 years of practice, my conclusion is cats just like to vomit because they seem to do it so well and so frequently, But so my kind of rule of thumb is if they're vomiting, once a week, a couple times a month, I don't worry too much about that, especially if there's grass in it or hair. You can chalk that up to irritation or, just they like it. So they do things to themselves to make themselves vomit. Eat too fast, eat too much, eat them off. That's all fine. But if it becomes more frequent, more than once or twice a week, and it's if you're on a pattern of increasing frequency, you want to nip that in the bud. You definitely don't want it to go further down the road. And of course, you can trial treat yourself with a hairball remedy. That'll often differentiate for you stuff that's going on in the GI tract versus asthma. Because the hairball hack sounds exactly like asthma. So you want to tease those apart, and sometimes just giving Vaseline or a hairball remedy will lean you one way or the other as to which is going on. It's kind of complicated, There's so many things. But if it's a hairball, that'll be solved by the Vaseline and asthma won't, and food allergies won't be made any difference with that. So that's an easy thing to do at home, and just see what happens, but don't let it go on too long before you take a more definitive action.
Okay. And can you just cover what you mean by the Vaseline for first-time listeners?
Well, actually, yes, because, hairball remedies are basically either mineral oil or petroleum jelly. I like petroleum jelly. It's completely inert in the body. It's more carbons in the chain than the body can break down. So it just stays in the GI tract exactly where you want it. It escorts the hair all the way to its destination in the litter box, and, a finger full of Vaseline. A lot of cats actually like it. And mine, of course, prefer brand name Vaseline. They won't eat the generic. Other cats, generic is good. They like Laxatone better than Petramol, better than Cadillac, whatever. But they're all based on the same principle: is you grease it up, you stick all the hair together, and you skid it out the other end. And Vaseline does that really well. Some people give vegetable oil or other kinds of oil for hairballs, and the problem with that is they may get the oil out of the stomach, which is good, but it doesn't, those oils can be broken down and absorbed by the body, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but then it doesn't finish its escort duty. It only gets it just so far, and I worry about that. So I like, something that's inert, it's safe, and it goes from beginning to end right there in its same form. Yeah. So it's pretty handy stuff. I remember when I had
like a teaspoon of it, and you shove it in their mouth.
What I do is I take a little fingerful, I stick my little finger in the jar.
Oh, okay.
And my cats will eat it plain like that. Others they like the flavorings in some of the hairball preparations. If you're going to do that, I would do a pretty good dose. I think on the ones that are in a tube, it says an inch or something.
Right.
But do that for 2 or 3 days in a row and see, give it a good trial. But if that doesn't change anything, then you want to call your vet and have it, have a discussion about what the possibilities are, what he palpates or she. I'm more likely to be a she these days, which I'm happy to report. So,
good.
Yeah. Well, my class at Colorado State was the first class where there were more women than men. So that's been a trend for a long time. So it's all good.
Good. I have had better experiences with female vets, so I'm glad to hear that. No offense to male vets out there.
And it's not that guys can't be good vets, but I think women tend to understand cats a little better.
Yeah.
The cat nature is more feminine. If you're looking at yin yang and things like that, the cat nature is more yin, and dogs are more yang. So I think there's something to that Chinese medicine thing there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why women are always associated with cats too.
Mostly, yeah. Except for Jackson.
Yeah, exactly.
He's an exception to many rules.
Yes. Oh. Okay, so you've touched on this and replying to some of the other questions, but what happens if a food intolerance or allergy isn't treated?
Well, a food intolerance will probably just get worse, and you'll be tired of stinky messes in the litter box, or you'll be tired of cleaning up or stepping in cat puke. And it kind of tends to be self-limiting in that you are going to do something eventually.
Right.
They'll just go on, pretty much unabated until you fix something. Allergies, like I said, can get worse. They can turn into inflammatory bowel disease. They can turn into lymphoma. So that's a road you don't want to go down. So, you know, you want to figure it out as early as possible, because they will get worse, and the symptoms will get worse, and your animal will be more uncomfortable. You know, they'll be itchy, they'll be pukey, or whatever they're doing. It'll get worse, and they'll start losing weight because they're not absorbing the food. They're throwing it out on the carpet, and you know, that food allergies are more serious, of course, and because they do involve the whole immune system. And once the immune system is kind of primed to make an allergy, to create an allergenic response with antibodies and the whole 9 yards, they tend to do that in response to more things. So you may start off with a food allergy, but if you don't treat it, they may then form other allergies. Like if you change an allergic cat food, you know, to something they're not allergic to, if you leave it be, this is why I really emphasize variety and rotating foods. If you put them on a different protein, eventually they will probably develop an allergy to that also. So, you know, I like food rotation, and you know, since I don't like dry food for kitties anyways, and I'm sure we've probably talked about that.
Yes.
You know, with canned foods, once they're eating canned or if they're eating raw, it's much easier. You can vary the flavor of canned food every meal. You can vary the type of protein in the raw diet with every batch, which is, you know, every couple of weeks, or freeze 2 or 3 kinds, you know, make 2 or 3 batches, one with turkey, one chicken, one bison or emu or whatever you want, or lamb, rabbit. There's all kinds of ones out there if your cat is willing to eat some of the prepared raw diets, or you know, Honest Kitchen makes the dehydrated diet,
right.
And they're not cooked. The diets that aren't cooked tend not to produce allergies, but anything's possible. But it is certainly, if you take a cat that's allergic to chicken, and because chicken is in everything nowadays, chicken is the most common allergen in dogs and cats right now. So, you know, if you look at the studies, they don't necessarily list chicken, but the allergists, you know, the internal medicine people say, oh, yeah, totally, chicken number 1. So chicken, beef, fish, wheat, corn, and dairy are the top allergens, kitties. So if you change from a processed chicken diet to a raw chicken diet, there's a good chance that they will not react to the raw chicken because the proteins haven't been altered. So there's nothing in it that they're not kind of designed to eat, and cats can eat birds without, you know. Chris Rock, you know, the comedian, once did a riff about food allergies, and he said all his friends have kids that are allergic to peanuts or shellfish or whatever, and he was like, who's allergic to food? You know, it doesn't make sense. How could you possibly be allergic to food? And we don't get allergic to food. We get allergic to processed food. So, you know, cooked in some way. Cannot be allergic to things that are raw. So, you know, raw food diet. Now, I will caution people that if you have a cat with a severe food allergy bordering or into inflammatory bowel disease, now you've got a leaky gut, you've got a gut that's inflamed, the blood vessels are swollen, the cells are swollen, the junctions between the cells are stretched out, and they're not stable anymore. So now what you have is a situation where if you feed raw, potentially the bacteria that's in all raw meat, they can get through. So you have a higher risk of, you know, salmonella or some other organism getting a foothold and causing a real bad problem in there. So if you want to switch a severe allergy or an IBD cat to raw, I would say start by cooking it a little bit, you know, just so it's pink and not raw. And then as the gut heals, you can cook it less and less and less. I know people who've gone straight cold turkey, dry food to raw overnight, no problems. But it's an increased risk, and and of course, switching a food abruptly can cause the world to hurt anyway.
Right.
Cats may be willing to eat it, or they may not. So a gradual transition is always the best way to go with a kitty, because you're changing a lot of things when you do that. You're also presenting a different form of food to the bacteria in the gut, and the bacteria in the gut are used to doing one thing, and the populations have adjusted to that. If you suddenly feed a whole different thing, you're going to probably have some diarrhea or some other reaction, because it's just, if you had never eaten elephant before, you might not react well to it.
Right.
The first time, your gut may say, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what elephant protein would be different from steak, but I'm sure there's something. So there may be just differences that the gut appreciates having a transition period to readjust the populations of the bacteria, to gear up the different enzymes. It's just, I think it's just smarter to do a gradual transition. Now, if you have a severely allergic cat and you're scared to death that something really bad's going to happen, they're losing weight, you're desperate, try a cold turkey. What do you got to lose? You have a cat that's on its way to a very bad state. If you're that desperate, try it. But in general, we hope that people catch things earlier and you can do it in a more logical fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, I like gradual in general. It makes more sense.
Yeah. And if you're transitioning, do the digestive enzymes and probiotics to help with that transition. Those are always good. I recommend them to put in the food regardless of what you're feeding or what you're changing. But especially if you're doing a transition, definitely use the digestive enzymes and probiotics.
Okay. Sorry, I was taking notes. Okay. So, treatment options available. You mentioned diet trials.
Right.
You've kind of been talking about them already.
Yeah, a little bit. But what people don't understand when you're dealing with an intolerance, you may be able to just change brands and you'll get a different result.
Okay.
And then you wonder about intolerance and things that are, because if you change the recipe and that one little thing isn't there anymore, you could change flavors, you could change brands, and probably you'll get a good response. With an allergy, you want to be real clear about the change you're making. And you want to get a completely different set of proteins and carbs, because carbs contain some protein. Corn has about 11% protein. So if you're going to do that, that's why they make the venison and rice, or rabbit and sweet peas, or salmon and sweet potato. But a lot of times, if it's not specifically promoted as an allergenic, hypoallergenic, or a novel protein is what we usually call it. That's technically more correct. You have to make a complete change from whatever you're feeding to an entirely new thing. And you have to be very religious about it. So if you're getting away from chicken and you're feeding rabbit and rice, and you still give Pounce treats or greenies or something, or fish, something, because most cat foods also have fish meal or fish something in them, for omega-3s and for flavor. But if you give bonito flakes or something, or treats that have chicken, you're undoing your whole shtick right there, because one exposure to that protein is going to cause a new allergenic response to be generated. Okay, so it takes 8, 10, sometimes even 12 weeks. Now, if your symptoms are only gastrointestinal, then the response can be very fast, within a couple weeks.
Right.
But if it's a skin symptom, those take a long, long time to clear up because those antibodies have to fade out. They have to, you have to not stimulate new antibodies every day. And if you accidentally expose them to that allergenic protein, you're going to have a problem. So it's really important to understand how strict you have to be. So if you have multiple cats, they all have to be eating that food because a stray molecule, could really set off your cat's whole immune system.
Right.
It's kind of like a flea bite allergy where, one flea bite can trigger a massive allergic response, head to toe. Yeah. And they can be really, really miserable from one flea. And so it's just that easy to trigger the response when they're already primed and ready. They're on hypervigilant immune surveillance, and boy, if I see one of those suckers popping its head over the horizon, I am going to blast it to Mars. It's you really have to give the immune system a chance to settle down and say, all right, okay, I think we're in the clear. I think we got them all. Then, once all the symptoms are cleared up, if you're feeling lucky, you can try to reintroduce the suspect proteins back, but be ready for a bad reaction. So my philosophy is why provoke it? Just stay with alternate proteins forever.
Yeah,
it's easy. Now one study not too long ago, in the last couple of years, they actually went out and tested an over-the-counter venison formulas that were promoted to be kind of hypoallergenic. They were venison and green pea or whatever they were. And they found that one of them did not have any venison in it at all, but it had soy and chicken. So there's a lot of cross-contamination that can happen. Mm-hmm. The hypoallergenic diets made by Hills and Purina and Royal Canin and whoever else is out there, those are pretty strict. I would go with the canned formula, and I would, maybe try and rotate those and try different things. There has been some evidence that after a few months, maybe 4, 5, 6 months, you may be able to switch back, or at that point you may be able to go to a home cooked or a raw, commercial raw or homemade raw, whatever you want. I just wouldn't go back to the diet that you had before. I mean, if your cat reacted badly to Meow Mix, don't feed Meow Mix ever. There's lots of alternatives.
Yeah.
I really like raw and homemade and even canned for cats. You're just going to have less problems to begin with. It's easier to rotate your proteins. It's easier to keep the immune system, a little off kilter so it doesn't freak out every time it sees something new. That's always a better way to go, is just don't provoke it.
Right. Okay. So, talking about prevention, and you have mentioned this, but again, just to lay the question out there, how can you prevent food allergies or intolerances? And that goes back to rotation.
Yeah, don't feed dry food. If you must, for some strange reason, you live in a fifth wheel and you're always on the road, I mean, you can certainly even arrange other things for that. But if you're traveling for some reason with your cat, and it's got to have dry food because you're in the middle of Nevada and that's all you can find, it's okay to have your cat be able to eat some dry food if in an emergency. So that can be in a repertoire as a treat or something. But if the basic diet is not dry food, you have a lesser chance of creating allergies in the first place. And if you feed a variety of foods, then the immune system isn't getting the same trigger every day.
Right.
And it's every day for a long time or frequently for a long time, those are the things that are likely to cause the reaction.
Okay.
So, I think food rotation is great. Most nutritionists do not agree with that, but a few do.
Oh, I think it is, even from a chronic renal failure. I mean, Kat, who just dealing with that and trying to get him to eat anything, I think if he had been exposed to more, then I would have had a little more success. So I think it's beneficial in a lot of ways.
Right. And there actually have been studies on a variety of animals, and they found that if they're exposed to a varied diet when they're very young, just after weaning, 8, 12 weeks old, and you start feeding them a variety then, years later, they'll still be willing to try more things. Cats that are fed dry food from kittenhood, very hard to transition because they don't recognize anything else as food.
Right.
Canned food isn't food because that's not what they're used to.
Right.
A different dry food isn't food because that's not what they're used to. I've seen cats get into some pretty serious trouble with that because when they, there was actually this woman called me and she was looking for Friskies ocean whitefish that was made at a certain plant. Mm-hmm. And because her cat wouldn't eat anything else. And that plant was closing down. So she was looking for cans with the particular code on the top. She had 142 cans left. Oh, and if she didn't find more, the cat was going to have some, he would stop eating, get hepatic lipidosis, probably not make it, or just starve himself to death. Cats will do that. Yeah. Cats are stubborn enough to, if they don't want to eat, they will not, and they will starve themselves to death. They're very unique in that way. Most other animals, when they get that hungry, they'll give in, but not cats. Yeah. I'm hard-headed Norwegian, and cats make me look like a wimp.
Yes. I experienced that stubbornness in the transition process. Oh, very annoying.
Yeah, so, when I was raising my kittens, they got everything. They got raw, they got canned, they got dry, they got every kind. They got lasagna. They were exposed to a wide variety of things. And now they're pretty easy to change. You put a new food down and they'll eat it. Now there's a syndrome in cats where you put a new food down, they'll eat it for 2 days like gangbusters, and they'll never eat it again. So do not rush out and buy a case of a food that you think your cat really loves.
Yeah.
If it passes 3 or 4 days and they're still eating it, maybe they're going to be okay. But, if they're used to eating variety, my cats, there's foods that I think are good for my cats, just like my mom fed me broccoli. Mm-hmm. Never liked it, still don't, but I'm getting over it. I'm really trying. But I'll eat it in Chinese food at this point, It's got lots. But if, so there are foods that I just think are better for them, or that it's a variety and I want them to maintain their willingness to eat a variety of things. I'll put it down until they eat it. They don't get, sometimes I have to put cheese on it or on top of a little baby food or something. But I make them eat it. It's like, tough love in this house. We are about tough love. And so they need to maintain that willingness because you don't know. I mean, we can have a blizzard. We had we had 7 inches of snow on May 1st. So, you might not be able to get to the grocery store for a few days. And if you run out of that, then you're in trouble like the ocean whitefish kitty.
Right.
You want them to be willing to do that, and you're just going to run into fewer problems over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to a Ragdoll cat breeder one time, and she mainly fed her cats raw, but also canned and dry food. And I was like, what? Why do you feed them dry food at all if you're into the raw thing? And she's based in Florida, and she said, I want to expose the kittens to everything so that if there's a hurricane and I can't get food, they can have food.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it makes sense. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier.
I keep a little dry food on hand just for, sometimes I use it as a treat. If they're really bugging me, I used to keep a bowl of it in my desk drawer because they were, when one cat between me and the computer, that's okay. I have a place for that. 2 cats can barely fit, but when the third one comes up, it's like, okay, that's it. And I take a handful of dry, throw it through the door out, Okay.
Yep.
And they would be occupied then for a while, and the pecking order would change, and we could try it again. But as a treat, why not? I get popcorn for dinner every once in a while.
Yeah.
I can go have, I can go to Dairy Queen once in a while. I don't do it every day, but a little bit is not going to hurt anything. So, I'm anti-dry as a mainstay of the diet or even every day, but once in a while as a treat, I do want them to be willing to eat it. So I keep some stashed away. There's a bag on the top of the refrigerator.
Yeah.
So, it's, you just want lots of options.
Yes.
For the kitty, it's really, really important because you don't know when you're going to really, really need it.
Yeah. And hurricanes and snow are not things I really think about in Kansas City, but yeah.
Yeah. We had a blizzard a number of years ago in March, and we had, I think, 3 or 4 feet of snow. And my street got plowed because it was a snow route. It was the ambulances and there was a hospital a few blocks away, so that was the main drag for the ambulances and fire trucks. So it got plowed. I couldn't get my car out for days. It took me a week to dig out.
Wow. So
that was just, and there was nothing within walking distance. If you didn't have snowshoes and a stout heart, you weren't going to be getting anything that you hadn't stocked up on beforehand.
Right.
And that was fine. We got over that. And by the way, when the post office says rain, hail, sleet, or snow, they don't really mean it.
Really don't count for 3 to 4 feet.
No, and they actually didn't deliver for almost a week when everybody else could get out. They still wouldn't deliver the mail. It was really weird because it was way more than what it should be. But the post office has its problems. Congress being the very least of them. And Congress they're having that whole thing. But but. Then it snowed a couple weeks later, only 7 inches, and we lost power for 4 days.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my car out of the garage because it was a flat roof and the snow weighed it down, and so the garage door wouldn't clear it, and there was no power. I couldn't even open it manually.
Oh, man.
The door wouldn't budge. Oh, that was a real disaster. So. You don't know. And we were out, with the hurricanes back east. I mean, people were without power for days, weeks even.
Right.
It's good to have keep your supply handy, but make sure that you have cats that'll go along with that program.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think I have some questions from readers, but you had also mentioned that you wanted to talk about drugs. So did you want to do that before I ask the reader questions?
Yeah, because that's pretty simple. It's the number one drug of choice in cats with severe allergies is Prednisolone. It's a form of steroid. Prednisone is a little different, and cats metabolize prednisolone better, and it's not. It doesn't require the liver to get involved. So if there's ever any reason to give prednisone, you must have prednisolone. Make sure your vet gives you prednisolone. So that's the number one. Sometimes they'll give an injectable to give you a few weeks of relief, in which you can be working on the other things, the diet and all that.
Okay.
Depot-Medrol is the common one. One side effect is diabetes, and I've seen it in cats. Their first shot of Depot, they get diabetes.
Oh my gosh.
The very first shot. I had a client that happened to him twice, which is why he ended up at our clinic. It's like, I can't believe this happened to two cats. The same thing. First shot, boom. And overweight cats are more susceptible because their insulin's already screwed up. If they're eating dry, insulin's already screwed up. So you give a steroid on top of it. Steroids and insulin work hand in glove. If you have a cat in a diabetic crisis, one of the drugs they give it is steroid. So, they're closely tied, and it is a known side effect of the Depot drugs. So, you want to be very careful about that. But if it's, if your cat's really miserable, treat it. Even get a shot that lasts a few days, triamcinolone or something. That's just, a short acting. But you've got to give them relief if they're in pain. Inflammatory bowel disease is painful. If you've got an inflamed gut, you are miserable. That's just not a happy thing. I think maybe in that case they really aren't having a lot of fun vomiting.
Right.
It gets so severe. If they don't respond to that, there are other drugs, cyclophosphamide. These are chemotherapy drugs. Even prednisolone is a chemotherapy drug. So what they're doing is stomping on the immune system and shutting down the immune response, period.
Okay.
Right now, right away, we're good.
Okay.
This is like totally smashed the immune system. So, then you're susceptible to infections and other lovely things like that. So these are serious drugs, and they're useful if you have a real problem and your cat is miserable. I wouldn't say never use them, but I'd say, try other things first. Really try not to go there, but, there are cases where, suppose you've been traveling in a cat sitter who's been cleaning up the vomit every day and never bothered to tell you, or you weren't excessively climbing Mount Everest. Maybe you didn't have a cell phone. Although I was still carrying my iPhone to take pictures, I'm sure. But I can imagine scenarios where all these things would just be in the worst possible configuration. You got to be prepared for that kind of thing. So I can see situations that could get out of hand, and you wouldn't really realize it. You got 12 cats. Well, you don't know who's puking, and then by the time you figure out it's the one that's losing weight, that's you may be in a tough spot. So those drugs do have their place. But you want to use them the shortest period of time possible, and and really be working on getting around it in other ways. Herbs are helpful. Acupuncture can be helpful. Homeopathy can be helpful. All of these things take time to work. Natural therapies tend to take time.
Right. Gradual.
Because you're working with the body instead of just shutting it down. And those things, to dial down something, it takes more time and effort than to flip a switch. So, people have to be prepared for something that they're going to have to deal with for a while. But eventually, hopefully, stress plays a role in all of this too. Because stress suppresses the immune system. You can get all kinds of weird reactions from that. I had a kitty that we finally got her dermatitis cleared up. Finally. And she came in for her vaccines. He was due for rabies. It was a situation. He had little kids. And, I said, I really don't want to vaccinate this cat. And there was a reason why we really had to do it, and I only gave rabies, and in 3 weeks she was back with the same. That's okay.
Oh.
That's it. Or never again. But there are people that absolutely refuse to forgo vaccines. But vaccines call on the immune system for a big response. And while it's in the neighborhood, well, why not react to something else?
Yeah.
So an allergy to anything can show up as skin symptoms in a cat. Anything. So, it's difficult to tease apart what skin conditions, but very few of them are food allergies.
Yeah.
On the other hand, ear infections in cats, more likely to be food allergies. Ear infections, you wouldn't think. But I had a dermatologist that I worked with at CSU, and she said she felt that 50% of cat ear infections were actually allergy-based.
Wow.
So, yeah, which I haven't seen anybody else say that, but they don't usually separate skins and ears and things. And, ears respond to, steroids, topical steroids. So then you never know what caused it. But, if you've got a chronic bad ear, change the diet.
Interesting. Well, that kind of goes into one of the first questions. Is there a way to differentiate between food allergies and environmental allergies? Was one of the readers' questions.
Yeah, not really. Not really. I mean, a diet trial is your first recourse because both could respond to steroids.
Okay.
So, allergy testing in cats, there's blood tests for allergies in dogs, and there's skin testing, which requires anesthesia, big deal. Neither of them is worth a darn in cats. So really kind of trial treatment is the only way you're going to know. And the only way you're going to really know is once they respond to a novel diet, you have to start reintroducing other foods.
Yeah.
It's an inhalant allergy when the steroids wear off or when it's going to come back or it's not going to respond. But since inhalant allergies sometimes respond to a diet change, it gets really complicated. But there's no good way to differentiate them in a cat. Okay. Not without a lot of time and effort. And you may never know.
Process of elimination.
Right, and you may never know. It's.
Yeah.
You could try moving to a place that has different allergens, and if the cat is fine, it was an inhalant allergy. But if it's dust mites, then no matter where you are.
Yeah. Okay, this one, my Ragdoll has gas. What kitten food additives could cause this and recommendations?
Well, there's
that 27 dry food.
Yeah, there's 27 categories of additives that are allowed in pet food, and many additives in each of the 27 categories. So it's impossible to say which. However, gas-forming bacteria, big one. So digestive enzymes and probiotics,
would be the solution.
Yeah, and if you're feeding dry food, get them off of dry food. And especially kittens should not have a major part of their diet is dry food.
Right.
That's just wrong.
Yeah.
On so many levels.
You've answered this one, but just to make it clear, because it was asked, can certain foods make a cat throw up?
Yeah, and that's, if it's an intolerance, any of those additives can do it. Could be an allergy, could be a lot of things. And like I said, cats like to throw up, so they will create circumstances for themselves to throw up. They'll eat your pothos. They'll find something. They'll find a bug or something to eat to make themselves throw up. It's just when it gets more frequent, then you start to say, okay, this may be a real problem.
Okay.
But a kitten throwing up, that's a problem. So, definitely
Okay. I think this was for an adult cat. Sorry, I should have told you a new question.
Oh.
So,
okay. Well,
new question.
Well, it would be an issue in kids.
Yeah, that's actually good to know. Here's the next one. My kitty has a sensitive stomach to cat biscuits / food. Is it healthy to feed them raw mince? I think this might have come from a British reader. Or chicken cooked with rice veg as their diet, or will they be lacking in vitamins, minerals, etc.?
Well, in extreme cases where you really, where you don't want to use steroids and they're in bad shape, you can do like a meat and rice and maybe a couple of veggies. Veggies don't add much nutritionally. If they're cooked, then some of the vitamins are gone, but they can't digest them unless they're cooked or pureed or broken down somehow. So, there's a lot of, they'll say, give ground lamb and rice for a couple weeks or even a couple months, but that is not a complete diet. And, in fact, it is very, very difficult to get all the even so. You can do it for a while.
Yeah. Not
in a kitten because they need their vitamins and minerals. But now that I'm on kitten on the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But but cats need meat. They definitely need meat, and you cannot give a cat a vegan diet or even a vegetarian diet. That's just ridiculous. I have a fairly extensive article on my website about vegetarian cats on Little Big Cat. So
I'll link to it.
Mince I've heard mince used in a couple different ways. Sometimes it's in the canned or what they would call tinned foods. That's fine, sure. And oh dear, my alarm's going off for some reason. I wonder why. But it would probably remind me to call you in a different time zone or some other planet. But if you could just get them off of the dry food because that's probably part of the problem. And but you can feed if you're mincing the meat, sure, but not just minced vegetables and rice, and you don't want to do it in an unbalanced way for more than a few weeks.
Okay. The next one, I have a Ragdoll with apparently a sensitive stomach. He doesn't throw up all the time, but much more frequently than the other two. If he has anything with beef, he throws up within a minute. Is this an allergy or just hard to digest? I'm speaking of cat foods, not table food.
It could be either one. I saw a remarkable video one time of they had an endoscope in a dog's stomach that was known to be allergic, I think it was to wheat. And so they had the endoscope looking at the wall of the stomach, and they went in with a drop of concentrated wheat gluten. And
how cool.
It was like watching a volcano erupt. It touched the stomach lining, and the inflammation was instantaneous and massive. It was just the most... it was just amazing. The dog was under anesthesia, so
right. But just thinking about him in his everyday life.
So it could be an allergy. I think it's probably more likely to be an intolerance. But because either one could cause inflammation, but an allergy involves the whole immune system and the whole antibody response. Once that response is formed, it can be pretty instantaneous, but an intolerance is still more likely.
Okay.
Because there may be something in the food that the stomach has a similar reaction as, oh no, So it could be either one.
Okay.
It's hard to say with cats, but obviously don't feed them beef.
Yeah.
And be aware that beef natural flavors could include beef. There's a whole lot of things that beef could be in. So you got to be careful.
Okay.
Oh, here's a point that we ought to make probably is that grain-free.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing intrinsically wrong with grains. as opposed to any other carbs. Carbs are not good for cats, and low-carb diets are best. Wheat-free or gluten-free or corn-free or soy-free. Those all can be allergens. They're uncommon allergens. And if your cat is allergic, it's much more likely to be to a meat.
Okay.
So, I would. There's been cases where dogs have been gluten proven to be allergic to gluten. They have celiac disease.
Oh, wow.
But it's real rare. It's real rare. So if your cat is reacting to something that has corn in it, don't assume that corn is the culprit, because the chances are it's fish or chicken.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, the last question says, I'm not sure how to word it, but with my cat Merlot, we thought for a couple of months we were dealing with food allergies, but it turned out to be dry FIP. If we if we had diagnosis earlier, we would have had the time to try PI or interferon. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, interferon doesn't work particularly well for that.
And he would not have lost as much weight from trying new foods. So I guess it's not a question, but
maybe.
Yeah,
it's a fatal disease. You might have bought him a little more time, but I would not beat yourself up over that. The food would have been a very minor issue with that going on.
Okay. Yeah.
In the case of FIP, FIP itself is already an aberrant immune response. It's a hyper-immune response. So now you have an animal that could react to anything at any moment, but at the moment it's reacting to coronavirus or something else. FIP is not caused by the virus. It's associated with the virus, but, flies are associated with garbage. It doesn't mean flies cause garbage.
Right.
So the idea that coronavirus causes FIP, to my mind, is still, it's involved, certainly, but is there a causation? That there's not really proof of that in my mind. But you have an immune system that's reacting abnormally, and it's the inflammation caused by the immune system and the immune plaques and the crazy immune response. That is what kills them.
Yep. That's awful.
It's a horrible disease, and dry FIP can look like anything. It's very, very tough.
Knock on wood. I don't hope I don't have to hear much more about those sort of stories. Awful.
Yeah, and and FIP is not as contagious as everybody thinks, and the vaccine is completely worthless. Do not vaccinate your FIP.
Sorry, just completely worthless. It made me laugh.
Well, it is. It is, and there's not an expert on the planet that anybody that really understands immune system. There, nobody recommends that vaccine or FIV for that matter.
Yes. I know that vaccinations is one on our list of topics, so hopefully we can cover that soon. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Well, the vaccine allergy connection. I mean, that's certainly there. Let me just let me look at our list here. Chicken. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to future interviews.
Yeah, we'll do it when I get back from my my trip. I'm getting ready way early, but the weather up there is pretty good. Even it has been for a month, which is unusual. So I think by the time we get there, it'll be all good. And Bear 399, the grizzly that lives in our neighborhood, she has 3 new cubs. So her last 3 cubs are still in the area, and the 2 surviving cubs from the previous litter are also there. So now we have at least 5
wow.
grizzlies in the area. So how about that?
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's pretty cool. We used to see mostly black bears, but now we see more grizzlies. See them sitting on the side of the road. Yeah. Wow. We see a lot of grizzlies up there now. So it's wonderful that their population is rebounding. And 399, she's a very smart bear. She hangs around Culture Bay and the human habitation because the big males will not come in there. So her cubs are safe from males that are not the father who will kill the cubs if they catch them. But they won't come in that close to humans. So she is a smart bear.
Sounds like it. Well, that's cool that you get to experience that every year. It's a little something more to look forward to. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go over this afternoon and repair the screen house that the curious bears kind of tore apart last year. So.
Oh, good.
So.
Well, thank you again, and I'll reach out next month sometime, and I'll certainly let you know when this gets transcribed and up on the site.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Thanks, and have so much fun.
It's going to be, if I just sit in my hammock for 2 weeks, I'll have fun.
I get it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
Have a great weekend. Bye.